Hello. Hi, I'm Victoria Alexander, and I'm the owner, and welcome to Buying into Brooklyn. I'm the owner of Realty Collective, a boutique real estate firm I started 18 years ago to defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers. I'm sure we're all very aware of them. And this workshop was designed to outline the buying process in Brooklyn, most of New York, all the 5 boroughs basically. And it is in no way comprehensive. But New York City is different from any other workplace, any other market, and can be overwhelming, especially if you've never done it before. So we will give you a good place to start today. We offer this workshop freely so that you have the information at your fingertips to make educated decisions and tear down the gatekeeping of information that is often used as a scary sales tactic to frighten you into working with people that might be the best person for the job. So if people aren't willing to give you information, red flag. We want everyone to feel empowered and educated, and this is the biggest investment you'll make in your life. You want to make sure you're making the right decisions for yourself and hiring experts you need to guide you and help you to avoid costly mistakes. We'll provide the basics you need to know before starting your journey, as well as provide you with the tools to make some of the first steps. Reminder to do the poll and to help us do the market research that we like to collect as a part of offering this class freely. So the first thing, go to the first slide, please, is that I tell people that they need to do is create your dream team. There are 3 people you need for this process. You need a real estate lawyer, you need a mortgage professional, and you need a buyer's broker, your real estate agent that represents you as a buyer, not the broker that is representing the property. I've worked with Lisa and Rashida together for a very long time, possibly worked for over 50 deals together at this point. It's important for me to work with other strong women and people I've worked with for a long time and have relationships with. It's easier to keep everyone accountable and communicate, especially when time is of the essence. And most importantly, keep deals on track and not let things fall apart for our clients. When you have people that already have relationships with each other, it's much easier to make sure a deal goes smoothly than people that don't have rapport with each other. So I'm going to let Rashida introduce herself, and then she can pass it over to Lisa.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashida Sadiq. I am a real estate attorney. I have been practicing now going on 20 years. I represent many first-time buyers. My office is physically located downtown Brooklyn. I'm licensed in both New York and New Jersey. I represent buyers in all of the boroughs, including Long Island, Suffolk, Nassau County, and Westchester. I look forward to giving, information on what the attorney's role is in regard to the purchase transaction and things that you should be looking out for and understanding as part of the practice. It's a small firm. It's myself, my partner, and another attorney. And as I said, 20 years of practicing real estate. I liken it to a roller coaster. But once again, look forward to giving you guys more further information. And take it away, Lisa.
Hey, everybody. My name's Lisa. I am a mortgage loan officer at Cross Country Mortgage. We are a correspondent mortgage bank, which basically means we work just like the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. I specialize in first-time home buyers. They're probably 90% of my business. I love working with first-time home buyers. I think it's really fun and exciting to help someone buy their first home. My primary focus of business is New York City, condos, co-ops, single family, multifamily, basically any residential property. I also, I can do loans all over the country, including I have a fair amount in New Jersey, Westchester, and Connecticut as well. But New York City is really my home base in terms of where I focus. And I'm really excited to talk to you all about the mortgage process and see how we can help.
Thanks, ladies. Okay, I'm back. And I'm Victoria Alexander, as I said earlier, and I'm a buyer's broker. I also do sales and some rentals here and there. I've owned Realty Collective for 18 years. And my role as your buyer's broker is I'm your coach. What do I cost? Nothing to a buyer. The seller pays both brokers. Why is that important? Because it's basically free expert advice that you need as a first-time home buyer. And that is true of all buyers brokers here in New York for right now. So take advantage of it. I'm a home matchmaker, therapist, your sounding board, whatever it takes to help you get into your home and keep you as sane as possible as you ride the wild roller coaster of emotions that is the home buying process. Right? Literally, my job is to guide you through this process, give you advice based on my almost 20 years of experience in the Brooklyn market. I've definitely done deals, and I'm doing deals now in Manhattan for buyers, not for sellers. And at this point, I've experienced it all. It's my job to get you into your first home and make you a homeowner, protect you from your own instincts, which often can get in the way of reason, and get you to the closing table. Plus, these services don't come as a cost to the buyer. I get paid by the seller at closing. So you should take advantage of having this expert advice and finding somebody that's going to be able to give it to you. So these are the three people you need: the buyer's agent, the attorney, and your mortgage professional. Having a buyer's agent is important because we have a fiduciary responsibility to you. The seller's broker has a fiduciary responsible to the seller. You want to interview all the people that are going to be on your team. In this case, it's nice to pick people that work together and come as a package deal because there is rapport and accountability to each other. But in the long run, you want to make sure you feel comfortable and they answer your questions. And this is an intimate process that you want to make sure that that's based on trust and transparency, and that you can accept advice from this person. So personality type is important. Is this the right person for me? Pick advisors that also have relationships in the industry. If your best friend just got their real estate license, they're not going to be the best advocate for you. They don't have these relationships. You need somebody that's been doing this several years so that they not only are seasoned experts, but they also have industry relationships that are going to help you in this process. Okay, so why buy now? The rent is too damn high. I think that's why most of you are here. The rental prices are crazy right now. It is about the same for a mortgage that it is to rent. And I don't blame you because that's one of the big reasons. You want your own design. You want control of your own property. You don't want to worry about painting the walls. You want to have a long-term investment in yourself and build equity for yourself. These are all great reasons to be buying. And the cost between renting and buying has never been closer. If you're looking to stay in Brooklyn or New York for the next 3 to 5 years, then buying is the best investment in yourself and your future and your pocketbook. The next slide is the rent versus buy matrix. So when people are at the beginning of the process, I tell them to go to the New York Times. We're going to put a link in the chat and you use the rent versus buy matrix. You're going to plug in some numbers, and this calculator is going to tell you if you should keep renting or if you should buy. And usually, if you plan on staying in New York City for longer than 5 years, then you should probably be buying. The only reasons you wouldn't be is if you were like in a rent stabilized or rent controlled apartment, and then those numbers might not make sense for you. So after you have figured out buying is right for you, you assemble your team. As previously mentioned, you need these 3 people: the attorney, your mortgage professional, and your real estate broker. You also might need a contractor, an architect. You'll definitely need an inspector. And your main team will have to, sorry, people are putting things in the chat and I got distracted. Your main team will be able to give you references and resources to these different professionals that you'll need for the rest of the process. So now that you have assembled a team, you are going to talk to Lisa about financing and get your pre-approval in place. You do not go on StreetEasy or Zillow or go to open houses. You figure out what your purchasing power is and you talk to a mortgage professional about what financing looks like. We all want you to get pre-approved before you start looking. If you're self-employed, it's important to talk to your mortgage broker before you file your taxes to make sure you're presenting the best version of yourself to the banks. It's important to do this step first so you know what properties are going to be available to you and that you're prepared when you walk into that property. If you love it, you're going to be able to do something about it. Otherwise, you're going to be behind everybody else. So how much down? What about your credit score? What's FHSA? Lisa, take it away.
Great. So yeah, like Victoria said, the first thing you want to do, if you're thinking about buying now, if you're thinking about buying 5 years from now, is to talk to a mortgage professional about getting pre-approved. The reason behind this is because you want to know what your buying power is before you start looking. What you don't want to do is fall in love with a place that is beyond your budget, because that's no fun to anyone. You also, like Victoria said, want to come in seeing properties fully prepared in terms of people knowing that you're serious, you've done your homework, you know what you're pre-approved for. So the pre-approval process is actually pretty personalized. So, if we talk about getting you pre-approved, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I'm going to talk about not only what you think you might want to buy, whether it be a condo or a co-op or a single family, but also your employment history. Are you self-employed or are you a W-2 employee? 100% you can get pre-approved if you're self-employed. But I need to see your tax returns, and we need to have a discussion to plan before you file your next tax returns to make sure you maintain the buying power that you need to have to be pre-approved for a certain amount. I'm also going to ask, how much are you putting down? The conventional amount is 20%. That doesn't mean you have to put 20% down. Some people put down 30%. Some people put down 10%. If you go FHA, you can put down as little as 3.5%. So we're going to really talk about what you think you want to buy. Are you getting a gift from a family member or something else? And then we're going to talk about a lot of products that we have. And this is where I think me and my team really shine, or one of the ways we shine, is that I have a whole lot of products, probably over 100. So I can really talk to you about what exactly your financial picture is and what you think you might want to buy. And then I can find the right product for you. One of the things we're going to talk about is a state of New York first-time homebuyers program, where we're one of the preferred lenders. It's an awesome program. It can help with down payment up to $15,000. You must be a first-time homebuyer. Your intention must be to live in the property, and you have to meet income and purchase price restrictions. So that's just one example of the programs that we'll talk about as we look to getting you pre-approved. For the pre-approval process, I'm going to be asking you for you're going to fill out an online application, and I'm going to ask you for some documents to confirm your income, to confirm your down payment. I'm going to run your credit, because a huge important part of a pre-approval process is to run your credit and make sure that the deal works with any debt that you have. And then I'll give you a pre-approval, and that's really a working draft. So with that pre-approval, you will start to go out with Victoria and figure out exactly what you want. And we can tweak that pre-approval as you narrow your search so that you are pre-approved for the right property you want. And then once you get that pre-approval, you can just start looking for properties, and then we'll always be in contact while you continue the search. A few really important points to point out about the pre-approval. This is based on the financial picture and the financial snapshot that I have taken during the course of our discussion. So if things change, like you change your job, like you buy a new car, all of these things, that doesn't mean you can't do it, but that means that that's something that we need to have a conversation about, because those factors change your pre-approval. So what we don't want to do is you think you're pre-approved for X, your financial picture changed, and now you're pre-approved for Y, and you fell in love with the property at pre-approval X. So it's really important to stay in contact with your mortgage professional throughout the pre-approval process, so we make sure that that pre-approval stays valid and is appropriate for what you're looking for. Victoria, back to you.
So, and it's really important when you're interviewing and considering mortgage professionals that you're hiring New York City experts. And your lawyer too. If just because your uncle's a lawyer and he's going to cut you a deal, Working with co-ops and condos are very complicated and New York City specific. And online places like Quicken and Rocket Mortgage, those mortgage pre-approvals do not fly in deals. So anytime I have a deal where someone's like, oh, I got pre-approved from Rocket, the other broker on the other side, and I would do the same thing for my client, is saying, I need another pre-approval from a bank that's actually closes here in New York, that understands the market here and the conditions here, because those companies are for like the middle of America, not for New York City. That is much more nuanced. And you want to deal with a real person, not a robot, because there's so many complicated moving parts to these deals. You need a real person at the other end that you can call and be like, what the hell is going on, when there is a small glitch that needs to be resolved. Because New York City is a specific beast. And I talked about not being a robot. So your team is assembled. You've got your big three, plus you might need your inspector, your contractor, your architect, and we have those names we can recommend. Oh, and this is financing. We just did that. And you're ready to buy a home now that you have figured out, after you're talking to a mortgage professional, that you can get a pre-approval and a bank is going to give you a loan. So we're going to talk about your timing, your buying strategy, your purchase power, and then some other things like timing, budget, your family, your lifestyle. What if you're ready to move now, 1 to 3 months, or in 5 years? It's never too early for us to start having conversations about this. You want to get the ball rolling as soon as possible so you can start saving and making those first steps so you're prepared for the process, because it is a lot for people to be saving for a down payment and still living in New York City. How long you're going to live in the property? Do you need to be able to rent it out? Do you travel? Is there a possibility you could get relocated for a job? How much do you want to spend, not just on the purchase price, but how much do you want to spend on your monthly maintenance and your mortgage and taxes? Are you really looking at those sticker prices beyond the purchase price? Do you have a family? You're going to be starting a family. Is it important to be near a subway, a certain school district, by a park? What does your family dynamic look like, and what are their lifestyle needs? Does your commute matter, and will it in the future, or are you working from home forever? And you need to want to be in Brownstone, Brooklyn, or you want new construction, you want a doorman. There's lots of things to consider about how we start this process, and we'll have those conversations. So how do you find your dream home? First, we're going to narrow down the location. If you are, hey, I want a doorman building in a pre-war co-op, what neighborhoods are those in Brooklyn? Brooklyn Heights, maybe Prospect Heights, probably not Park Slope. There's not a lot of doormen, but there's a few here and there. If you want gym and lots of amenities, probably downtown Brooklyn, Williamsburg. The things that you want need to match the neighborhood you want to live in as well. And do you want the building? So building typology and amenities are part of that conversation. And then I tell people to make their list of 5 deal breakers and then realize that you could probably only have 2 or 3 of them. It's part of the learning process that New York City comes with lots of limitations because it's very expensive and they are not making the same type of property that they are in the rest of the country. You won't get everything you want unless you have an unlimited budget. Then you want to consider your closing costs. Not only do you need to get your down payment together and understand what that looks like and save for that, but you also have to have something called closing costs for co-ops. So if you're looking for co-ops that have limitations for renting out, and you need to understand what that looks like. So you wouldn't be able, and then how long you could rent it out after you've lived there for a certain amount of time. You'll learn more. Farah's going to put a link in the chat, the co-op versus condo questionnaire. Co-ops have closing costs about 1 to 3%, average around $4,000, and 3 to 5% for condos. And new construction has all sorts of other fees associated with it and those are only condos, and they have closing costs like transfer taxes that you don't see on resale. That would be co-ops, normal co-ops and condos, and multifamily homes. Sellers also have closing costs, which are usually about 8%. And so where do you start looking? I know everybody's probably on StreetEasy, Zillow, Realtor.com. I've got some crazy ones like Redfin. Somebody's been sending me listings from Redfin. It's like, What are you looking? We have a back-end database that we will set you up with that gathers all of the listings into one place. If you're looking in, middle of nowhere, Queens or Long Island, it's harder to get all the listings in one place because they're not part of the multiple listing service. So there are some challenges, but I would just say that Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, all the listings should be in one place. Zillow doesn't do such a great job of deciphering if things are actually co-ops because they say everything's a condo, even though it's a co-op, and can often misrepresent some of the taxes and details on things. And Zillow owns StreetEasy. I still feel like that for a consumer, StreetEasy is still the most user-friendly and easy to use. They also don't let people put multiple listings on there. So you're actually getting just the one listing once with the true broker. Except for that, brokers can pay to have their names on other brokers' listings. So even though I'm representing 870 Pacific, unless I pay StreetEasy, another broker could put their name on my listing so that they can get leads and try to get buyers to work with them. Do not let the internet pick your buyer's broker. Do your research and do not call people off those listings. Find a buyer's broker and let them do all the calls for you, interview people, and make a conscious decision about who you want to work with. Do not let it be at random and just somebody off the internet. Like, oh, I called them, they were representing this, and then they told me it wasn't available. That's what happens all the time. That's a line. It's still available. It's bait and switch. Don't fall for the tactics. Make sure you're consciously deciding who you want to represent you, and not letting StreetEasy take money so that somebody can pay to convince you to work with them. And the internet has changed everything, made things more transparent. All brokers who are members of REBNY have to work together and have to have access to the same listings. The days are over of those off-market listings that are hidden in the haystack. The real estate agent's job is to help you win the place you fall in love with, not find you the unicorn that no one knows about. REBNY is developing their own platform that has just gone live, actually, and there's no more gatekeeping of listings and information. Like I said, you have to clean up the data for StreetEasy, Truly, and Zillow, and like recommended StreetEasy. Does anybody have any other places they're looking that I didn't mention? Put it in the chat. I'm always interested to hear where you think is the best place. Google, people use Google for searching. And so we'll set up searches for our clients that aggregate all this information for you from our database. You can still use your own platforms. And keep in mind when you're looking at the listings online, like I said, you'll see the seller's agent. The seller's agent represents the financial best interest of the seller, not the buyer. What are pocket listings? Oh, good question. Pocket listings are listings that brokers don't share. So say I got this listing 100 King Street. I could not put it on the MLS, which would be a violation of the REBNY rules, and send it only to my clients and people that I know without putting it on the multiple listing service. And that is ethically wrong. And it's called a pocket listing, and people aren't allowed to do it. They have to do, once you get a listing, you have to put it on the internet within 24 hours, unless a seller for some reason has said in writing in the contract, do not put my listing on the internet, and has cause. So that's what a pocket listing is. And like I said, so when you walk into a listing that you go to an open house, the broker that is there has the fiduciary responsibility to the seller and is looking out for the best interest of the seller. Yes, they want you to come in. They're going to be really nice to you and convince you to buy this. And then if you don't like it, they'll try to, hey, you should still work with me. They're always looking out for the seller or themselves. So you should make a conscious decision on who you work with. You want to pick somebody that's going to ask the right question for you and develop a competitive offer strategy for when you find the right property. Making an offer and negotiating. Just rolling right through the information here. Were there other questions that were at that point? Nope. Okay, good. So it's so important to be ready. That is why I tell you the first thing you do before you go look at any property is to get your pre-approval done. Because there are many times where we go out on the first day with clients and they fall in love with something. And if you fall in love and if you are not ready, you are not going to win that property. Some people say that's like, oh, well, it wasn't meant to be. if you find the right one, you want to be prepared. If you're going out and looking at listings, you should be prepared. So you need to get your pre-approval letter finished. You need to get an offer form filled out with all your details, so it's already there, and do a cover letter. Those are the 3 things I put into your homework before we start going out and looking at stuff. Being the first offer in shows you're serious, you're well educated, and you're ready to go. If you've been looking for months and finally the property that you've been dying to come on the market has come on, you should get your offer in first. There is a psychological strategy to doing that sellers actually fall for and feel like, oh, this is my person, because their seller's broker has prepped them for that. Like, this is your buyer that comes in first. This is your person that is ready to go. They know the market and they know what they want. We should go with this person. Not always the best offer financially, but sometimes it's the best offer because of some of the terms, because sellers sometimes don't always want the best, highest offer. Sometimes they want to stay in their home for 6 months, or they want somebody that's putting 30% down because they're worried about financing. There's lots of ways to strategize to make sure you understand what the brokers will talk to each other to make sure that you're positioning yourself to actually win the property that you want. I can talk a little bit about existing market conditions, which I have a note on. It's a little bit crazy. There's inventory. So even though with interest rates rising, there is a lot of demand. And so with low inventory and high demand, it's been keeping prices higher than we had thought maybe they would drop because of the high interest rates. So it's pretty competitive still. Things are moving quickly and not staying on the market very long. One of the main resources that working with a buyer's agent provide is their relationship and knowledge with other agents. Repeat deals together and understanding the seller's agent strategy and temperament can give a real competitive advantage, especially in a hot market to the sellers, because the seller's agent wants confidence in the deal. They want to be, if we have an accepted offer, they want a signed contract within a week, and making sure that they know and trust the other broker on the other end is going to give you that sort of confidence to make sure that the deal is going to happen and get your bid won. I worked in Brooklyn for over 20 years, so I have a lot of relationships with other brokers that I think really helps my clients because my name is very recognizable. And it really helps with your offer strategy, understanding what the other brokers on the other end. I've done deals with some brokers many times, so we have such a long history and rapport. I understand how to write up the offer and speak to them and say exactly what I need to make sure that my client gets the property. You want to work with an agent that creates a negotiation strategy with you and devises the strategy based on what you feel comfortable with, and making sure you're going to get to accepted offer if this is what you want for this property, and being prepared and submitted to the lawyers on the deal sheet. We can go into what the deal sheet is set for. That's up for Rashida next. The contract terms are different from the deal terms. You might win a bidding war when you offer the above asking price, but your offer is contingent on financing, contingent on inspection, and having that inspection before we go to contract signing, and understanding what an as-is sale is. So do you want to go over some of the now that we've have accepted offer, what deal sheets and getting into contract look like, Rashida?
Sure. So as an attorney, I always tell clients I come in like towards the ending of the process. You've been looking, you've got your pre-approval from your lender, and now your realtor has negotiated the accepted offer with the other agent, and they put together basically what we call as a deal sheet. A deal sheet is a summary of that accepted offer. So it will have the names of the parties, who the seller is, who the buyer is, who the buyer's attorney and the seller's attorney. If it's a co-op or a condo, it will have the management company's information. Sometimes it'll also have your loan officer's information. It will also have some of the major terms of the transaction that was negotiated, such as the purchase price. If it's contingent on a mortgage, you'll have a mortgage contingency, the amount of that contingency. If you're doing 20% down and your mortgage contingency is going to be 80%, it will have that in there. It will also have if things are excluded. It will generally have, unless it's been negotiated, a closing date, but most times it would say as soon as possible or 60 days, but those are kind of like your standard terms that go on the deal sheet. Once that deal sheet is sent out to the attorneys, the next step is for the contract to go out and also for you as a buyer to do an inspection. In New York, you do your inspection prior to you signing the contract, which is very important. The reason that an inspection is done prior to you signing the contract is your contract is going to have a provision that says you've done your inspection, you understand the condition of the property, you're purchasing it as is, or you waived your inspection. And as is means that when you saw the property, that's how it's going to be when you close. So plumbing, heating, electrical systems, they are in working order when you saw the property. So they should be in working order when you close. Appliances were working when you saw the property. They should be in working order when you close. However, if you do your inspection and it turns out an appliance isn't working or an electrical issue, or maybe the electrical isn't up to capacity, or there's a broken window, those things you will know prior to you signing the contract so you can raise them as things that the seller has to fix prior to closing, or you can get a credit, or you can negotiate a lower purchase price, but you have to do that prior to you signing, because if you don't do that inspection and it turns out, hey, that window was broken when you saw the property, but you only looked at the property that one time and you didn't really pay attention, and now at the closing, you do your walkthrough and the seller says, hey, that was already broken. I'm not fixing that. The reason you did that inspection, hey, no, it wasn't broken when I did that inspection. You can get a credit for that, those type of things. So it's very important that you do that inspection prior to you signing, whether it's a house, a co-op, or a condo. I definitely recommend you do an inspection. Because once again, as I said, you're taking the property in as-is condition, and that's what the contract of sale is going to state. So those are one of the terms that you'll see, and one of the things that happens after your deal sheet and your offer is accepted. In New York, until the contract is signed by both parties, it's not binding. So even though your offer has been accepted, the purchase price has been negotiated, sometimes things do happen. And as I said, during that inspection, that it can be negotiated. As I said, credits or lowering of the price. Also, if you're looking at a co-op or a condo, some things that go in prior to you signing the contract is due diligence review by your attorney. Your attorney has to look at the financials of the building for a co-op and condo, look at the offering plan, look at the board meeting minutes. They send questions to the management company to find out about the history of maintenance or common charge increases. Is there going to be an upcoming assessment that maybe you did not know about? All of these things happen prior to you signing the contract. So that due diligence can take anywhere, sometimes up to a week, depending on the building. And it's done prior to you signing the contract. If something comes up in that due diligence and you determine, hey, this isn't a property for me, they've had maintenance or common charge increases for the last 10 years, and they always at 5%, 7%. Hey, this is something I didn't know about. I didn't budget for that. Maybe there's an upcoming assessment because they now have to redo the facade work or redo the roof. And there's now going to be $100,000, $1 million expense of the co-op or the condominium, and the shareholders are going to have to share that. That's an expense you're going to have to take on. So this is something you didn't know prior to you putting in your offer that can sometimes be negotiated where the seller pays the assessment. Or as I said, until you sign the contract and the seller signs it, you can walk away from the deal because things come up in that due diligence or in that inspection process. Now that kind of room is done after your offer is accepted, the terms have been negotiated, but once again, because you haven't signed the contract yet, if something comes up, it can be negotiated in collaboration with your realtor and with your attorney and the other side's agent and the other side's attorney on what changes are to be made and incorporated into the contract of the sale. The contract of sale is your final document. That's where all of the terms are now in writing. You're going to sign. And that's why it's important that things like inspection issues, due diligence items, closing dates, all of that now comes into the contract of sale. Any contingencies come into that contract of sale when you go to sign it. Typically, as I said, the time period between your offer being accepted, the deal sheet going out, and getting into contract for a co-op and condo can be anywhere between a week. It can sometimes be longer depending on how quickly documents are given to your attorney. If it's a house, it's typically a lot faster process because you don't really have that due diligence that you have to do with the management company. It's just your inspection. And once you get your inspection and you know the condition, your attorney can review the contract and go over it with you. If Farah, if you want to go to the next slide, which I believe is the contract, getting you into contract. So once again, so now your offer has been accepted, you've done your inspection, so you understand the condition of the property. Now getting you into contract is the role of your attorney. And that's where the due diligence, as I stated, for a co-op and condo comes into play. If you're looking at a house, your attorney may look up the property and find out what the real estate taxes are, may look to see if there's any violations, look to see if there's a certificate of occupancy, some sort of due diligence as well as done. Not all attorneys do it, but the good ones that do real estate typically will do that, because my philosophy is always you want to be prevention versus reactive and know upfront if there's going to be potentially any title issues if you're looking at a house. And if it's a co-op or a condo, same kind of prevention. You want to know what's are the financials for the building good? Is there, there's a sponsor who originally turned into a co-op or a condo. Do they own a lot of units? What's the pet policy? If you have a pet, are you planning on doing alterations? You want to get the alteration policy. Subletting, co-ops and condos. For co-ops, you have to get approval, but some buildings require you to be a shareholder for a certain amount of years. There may be fees associated with that. So you want to know that upfront as you're looking at the type of properties. So all of that has happened during that due diligence period. Reviewing the offering plan, part of the due diligence. If it's a newer construction, the offering plan is pretty up to date. If it's an older building that was formed 20 years ago, the offering plan, I always say, is more informational. So you'll see the original shares in the building. You'll see the common charge information. You'll see the original proprietary lease. But a lot of the older offering plans are more informational than because it's been a co-op or condo for 20 years or more. But your attorney's still reviewing that, but may focus more on the financials, the house rules, the more updated information. So all of that happens prior to you signing. Some of the things that you are typically looking at once you're getting into contract are what are your contingencies. If they're mortgage contingency, your standard contract will have a mortgage contingency. You have 30 to 45 days to get your mortgage commitment once you're in contract. All of your time periods begin to run once you're in contract. If you're not able to get your mortgage during that time period, you have a right to cancel the contract, get the return of your deposit. Everyone wants to make sure that their down payment, which you saved out for how many years, what happens in situations if I'm not able to go through with it. And those are your contingencies. In mortgage contingency, you get your down payment back if you're not able to get it within the time period. Typically, your contract as part of your mortgage will have that it has to appraise. So it's important that you make sure that you do have an appraisal language in there. There was at one point when people were waiving the appraisal contingency. If that ever is your situation, you want to have a serious conversation with your loan officer, with your realtor, and with your attorney, because that is a significant part of your contract, because if it doesn't appraise for the purchase price and there's no appraisal contingency in there, you still will have to purchase the property and will need to come up with additional funds. But if you have your standard mortgage contingency, you have that appraisal language in there, you're covered if the property doesn't appraise for the purchase price. There's another contingency in there that's still important, but I would say it's more on the back end where your attorney is looking at the title to the property to make sure that the seller has the right to sell you the property, that there's no violations, there's no bankruptcies. If there's any mortgages, they get paid off. If it's a co-op, that if there's a mortgage on the property, that the seller gets their documents in time for the closing. So that's happening on the back end with your attorney and the title company while you're working on the front end with your mortgage to work on your mortgage contingency. So those are your two standard contingencies in the contract: mortgage contingency, title contingency. If either one of them you're not able to get a mortgage or you're not able to get good title to the property, you have a right to cancel the contract, get the return of your down payment. If you're purchasing a co-op, there's the third contingency, which is the co-op approval. And that's typically done after you got your commitment. If you're not approved by the board, you have a right to cancel the contract, get the return of your deposit. If it's a condominium, condos have what we call as a right of first refusal. And 99% of the time, the condo is going to waive that. So it's just a matter of filling out the paperwork to get it done in time for the closing. Very rarely would the condo say, no, the seller is not, they're not going to issue that waiver. Because if they don't, they have to purchase the unit from the seller. So as a buyer, as I said, most likely they're going to issue that waiver, even though they still have you go through sometimes an application similar to what you would see for a co-op. But it's more about getting the documents through for that. So that's getting you into contract and some of the things that you're going to be doing while you're in contract for that portion. You had a question, Victoria?
No, there's some good questions in the chat. One about new development inspection. So you can have an inspection for new development and so that you really understand what you're buying, but new development comes with warranties, and then you get to do something called a punch list. So instead of doing a final walkthrough, you do 1 or 2 punch list creation walkthroughs where you go through the property and you pick out, like, because it's not a resales, you don't get to nitpick over cosmetic stuff. But for a new development, you get to go, well, there's a chip on the cabinet. There's a chip in the floor here. There's this wrong here. The front of the AC unit's not staying on. We need these things done. And you'll create a list of everything that's wrong in a new development that's within your specific unit. And then they will fix everything and fix it before closing. And some things will be memorialized after closing, and if they cannot get them repaired beforehand, but they have a then commitment to fix them because of that. And most of the property and the utilities and the appliances come with a warranty on them. Then she's asking, this is a question for you, Rashida, about can an offering plan change after it's been submitted? She said, can Schedule A in an offering plan change after it's approved?
So if you are looking at a new development, yes, it can change. And part of it, and this happens prior to them actually starting the closings, because for new development, you're right in the beginning of the process when they're converting it in. And typically you're looking at condos. There's not a lot of new co-ops out there now. So when you're thinking about Schedule A and offering plans, you're typically looking at the new construction, new development condominiums. And yes, they do change because there's a provision in there that says that they're able to change it prior to your closing. The Attorney General for New York does approve all of the amendments to the offering plan, and that's how they would typically change a Schedule A. Sometimes the common charge based on the new, maybe it's been delayed for a year, so now they have to change the common charge allocation, or maybe they made a mistake. So all of these things can change the Schedule A through an amendment to the offering plan. Now, if it's an existing building that is no longer it's a resale, so the offering plan the condominium has been formed, you won't see that Schedule A change. If you're doing a resale, it's going to be the latest amendment or the original Schedule A. You won't see that because once the seller has purchased it, now it's and it's been recorded, that declaration, that's where it's no longer being changed. It's only if it's prior to them starting the closings.
there's a couple other good questions here, but I want to just let Lisa talk about what happens when you're in contract from the financing point of view before we get to actual closing. Are you still here, Lisa? I know you had to jump off.
I'm here. I'll do this
Great.
really quick before I have to go. Yes. So once you're in contract, like Rashida mentioned, a time clock has started where you need to get a mortgage going. The good news is you would have been talking to me throughout this whole process. So we are 100% ready to go once we have fully executed contracts. We will, once you have fully executed contracts, the appraisal will get ordered. And basically, our big goal is to get you through underwriting as quickly as possible. And this is honestly where I think me and my team are pretty freaking amazing because we're just really fast. So, and partly it's because I've gotten so much from you up front and we know the numbers of this deal from the beginning because we've done this pre-approval together that that we're basically able to hit the ground running and get you into underwriting as soon as possible. And why this is important is because the faster you get through underwriting, the faster you're going to get your mortgage commitment. That mortgage commitment, as Rashida talked about, is due by a specific date if you have a mortgage contingency. So the faster you get that mortgage commitment, not only do you know you don't have any issues with your mortgage, but more importantly, you're protecting your down payment because you're checking that deadline in the contract as soon as possible. Moreover, if you are purchasing a co-op, a huge time factor in the process is the co-op board approval and the co-op board interview. The co-op will not schedule an interview until they have that commitment letter. So the faster you get through underwriting and have that commitment letter, the faster you can schedule your board interview, which will keep you on track to close on time. Because some co-ops say, yeah, sure, come in tomorrow for an interview. Some co-ops say our first interview date is 3 months from now, and there's nothing you can do about it. You really have to go by the co-op on that. Once you have the mortgage commitment, you will have a few little items, to be updated. Like when you buy a property, you have to pay your first year of homeowners insurance prior to closing. Maybe a few documents need to be updated. A letter of explanation needs to be clarified. Very little things. And basically me and my team will work on helping you through that so that we can get the clear to close, which basically means the bank has completely signed off on the deal and we're ready to schedule. One question I want to answer from the chat real quick before I have to jump off is about asset depletion. So to that person that asked the question, I do asset depletion loans all the time. It's a special type of loan program for people to qualify a lot of times because their income on their tax returns are not enough to qualify, but they have a lot of assets. In terms of if a co-op is okay with it, I think that's really a question depending on what co-op you're going to look at. A lot of them aren't because they want to sort of see more standard projected income, but that doesn't mean all of them aren't. But for this person, this might be a really good example of you might want to look more at condos because a condo would have no issue with an asset depletion loan. So that's just, I just wanted to answer that question. And then the last thing I wanted to say is just, about rates in the market before I jump off. So rates are higher than they were 3 years ago. We all know that. The good news is they're lower than they were about 7 months ago. So that's good. The bank crisis going on First Republic is actually sort of helping the mortgage industry because it's actually starting to fight sort of the inflation talk and rates are starting to go down because of that. In terms of where rates are now, it's actually very specific based on your loan, what you're buying, et cetera, et cetera. But I can tell you what I'm telling all of my clients right now is the rate that you're going to get for the place that you buy is not going to be the rate you have for 30 years. It's probably not even going to be the rate you have for 2 years because you're probably going to be in a situation where you want to refinance in a year to a year and a half from now when the inflation concern has finally reached its bottom and rates really start going down. So the way to look at rate right now is it is the rate to get you your house. And then when we talk, we'll have a conversation about when you refinance, what that's going to look like. If you refinance with cross-country mortgage, for example, we waive a lot of our costs on the refinance precisely so you're not sort of double hit, because so many people are refinancing so close right now because of the rates. But that's something to sort of keep in mind. I have to jump off. I have a kid with pink eye. My babysitter has to go, but
Okay,
you'll
thanks,
have my
Lisa.
contact
I got
information,
it.
and I'll talk to you guys later.
I'll fill in the blanks. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
So that's just like something that we tell people that, you just have to be very aware of. Like, you're married to the property, you're not married to your mortgage. You're going to be able to refi once the market changes for the interest rates. So, and you don't need to take a 30-year mortgage. You could take an ARM. There's a lot of my clients are taking 7-year ARMs right now, and the rates are in the 5s. So you need to just strategize what that looks like for you with your mortgage professional and your team. The other thing you're doing at this point, an ARM, you can talk to a mortgage professional about an ARM. I'm not going to jump into it right now because that's not my area of expertise also. And I just want to wrap this up and then get to the questions. But I have, if once you're in contract, and if you're in contract for a co-op, we will also be working on your co-op package, which is a big heavy lift that we end up putting all the paperwork together for you and making it beautiful so that the board says yes to you, and then prepping you for the board interview process, which is another part of the co-op application process. Lisa's doing all of her due diligence and making sure you're getting that commitment letter. We cannot submit your board package until we have your commitment letter. And then that can be a couple more weeks after that, after we get management to approve it and the board to schedule your interview, then for them to approve it and then send the letter, so that then we can finally schedule the closing. I don't know if we're in contract, Rashida, if you have to talk about anything else about being in contract before we talk about closing, but I'm going to hand it over to you because all I have to do is the final walkthrough and show up at the closing table at this point, because all my work happens in the front end of the deal, and then it's on you guys.
Yeah, so just a little bit for when we're in contract, just touching base about the time period. So as we had mentioned, the time period for you to get the mortgage is typically 30 to 45 days. But for your closing date in New York, your closing is typically on or about 60 days if you're looking at a house or a condo. And on or about gives you an extra 30-day grace period in there because there's so many moving parts. But we typically aim for that 60-day time period from when you sign the contract to the closing. If you're looking at a co-op, your closing date can be anywhere from 60 to 90 days, sometimes a little bit longer, because you have to get that mortgage, then wait for the board interview, submit your application, then wait for the board interview, and then wait for maybe another 2 weeks for the scheduling of the closing. So typically I tell clients for a co-op, at minimum, you're looking at 90 days. It can happen sooner than that if things go pretty quickly, but don't think about 60 days for a co-op. It's really tight. Possible, but tight. For a house and a condo, you're typically looking at around 60, but for a co-op, you're looking at roughly around 60 to 90, sometimes longer. And all of that is going to be in your contract of sale. So now you've been pre-approved, you got your mortgage, you're clear to close. It's been that 60 or 90-day period, and now you're looking to schedule that closing. I know one of the individuals had asked about what an ARM is. It just stands for adjustable rate mortgage. And yes, definitely speak to a mortgage person about what that is. It basically is your interest rate adjusts after a certain time period. So they can discuss with you what's the best options. But people, and I have seen clients doing some of those mortgages for co-ops, for condos, for houses. But then you have to understand that there is a ceiling on the highest their interest rate can go, and then there's a low on where that interest rate can go. And you need to understand that and the time period on when that can happen and when it adjusts. But definitely a conversation that you can have versus a fixed rate mortgage, which your loan officer can also explain to you. And actually when you're closing and you're scheduling your closing, that's typically the documents that you're going to be signing at the closing. So if you want to go to the next slide, Farah, about scheduling that closing. So you've been clear to close, you got your mortgage. The role of your attorney is to schedule the closing with all the parties. If it's a co-op, they're scheduling with the co-op attorney, they're scheduling with the seller, the buyer's bank attorney, the lender. So there's about 7 different parties. It's in person. You have typically bring bank checks to the closing. Your attorney will go over all of your closing documents with you, the mortgage documents, which you would have got some disclosures during the processing of your loan, but at closing is when you're signing it. So you're signing that note, which tells you whether it's an adjustable rate mortgage, whether it's a fixed rate mortgage, those type of things, when your first payment is due. So that's all of the documentation that you're going to be going and signing at that closing table. Typically, your closing is roughly about 1.5 to 2 hours of signing documents. If it's a house or a condo, you're signing your deed, you're signing your transfer documents, you're signing your mortgage documents, you're signing any of the co-op documents as well. Sorry, condo documents. If it's a co-op, you're signing your proprietary lease, you're getting your stock certificate. Once again, you're signing all of your bank documents and all of your closing documents as well. So that's why it takes roughly about 1 hour to 2 hours for your closing. Prior to your getting to the table, you have to schedule your final walkthrough with your agent. And this comes full circle about that inspection that you did before you signed the contract, is to make sure that everything is the same way that you saw it when you saw that property, when you did your inspection, that everything is still working. You do your walkthrough typically between 24 to 48 hours prior to the closing date, so that if something comes up, there's enough time to get things repaired or get estimates so that you're not surprised. You're already nervous on your closing date. So you really want to take your time to do that walkthrough. Because when you close and you get those keys and you turn over your funds, it's your property. There's no warranties. There's nothing that survives if you're buying a resale. If you're buying new construction, that's another conversation, because there's some warranties that you get. But typically, if you're buying a house or a co-op or a condo that's a resale, you're not getting any warranties. Closing date, you got the keys, you turned over your money. Now it's yours. You have to make sure you get insurance, because as soon as you close, it's now your property and your responsibility. And mute. Yeah.
I realized that. I got very excited. Then you close, you're at the closing table and it's all done. Do not schedule your movers the same day as your closing. There's lots of other pitfalls that have added stress to people's situations, and that is a classic one. They're like, the movers, but I've already scheduled the movers. Well, we didn't tell you to schedule the movers. Making sure you have some lead time on your lease and things like that. You don't want to be trying to do everything in 24 hours. Like New York City is too chaotic and lots of things go wrong, and you need to be prepared for that. A lot of things, even though if we do everything right and you do everything right, there's still other people on the other end of this deal that we cannot control, and the deal can go in a crazy direction and somebody forgot to sign a piece of paper and the closing is delayed till next week. And then you definitely have to delay your movers. So I think that we answered all of the questions that were in the chat. I don't think that there was anything that we didn't go over. We went over the offering plan. Somebody asked, if a seller has accepted my offer, at what point can a seller legally no longer take a better offer? They can take a better offer up until both of you have signed the contract and you have given them the down payment. So you're not going to be safe from any other offers coming in until you have a fully executed contract with your deposit.
Yeah, I normally say when your attorney sends you that contract back and says you're in contract, that's when you're in contract. And that's when the seller no longer can entertain any other offers. But up until then, even if you signed it and given your deposit, the seller can walk away and you can. And I've had clients over the 20 years, I've had it both, where I had one client where my client signed it, gave the deposit, and found out the next day that she was pregnant and they probably would not be living in a studio. So she was like, Rashida, I need to get it back. And the seller hadn't signed it yet. So we were able to say, no, she's no longer proceeding. We're not moving forward. And the same thing with the seller. Unfortunately, sometimes the seller decide, even though the buyer has signed and given their deposit, not to move forward. So until it's fully signed by both parties and the contract deposit has been received by the seller's attorney, that's when you're in contract.
What is required to refinance if interest rates improve? The same documents that you would need to finance to get the approved for the original financing. So usually they ask you for the same bank statements, job verification, and all those sort of documents that you would need just to get the original financing. They'll ask you this for the same documents for the refinancing. Does that answer your question, Samuel? And then there's usually some fees, but Lisa's saying that if you're refinancing within cross-country, that they are waiving some of those fees because there's usually fees associated with refinancing, but you just have to calculate if it's within the right numbers to make sense for you to refinance. Have you
And
thought?
then
Go ahead, sorry, Rashida.
I was going to say, also, if you're thinking about refinance, obviously speak with your loan, with the loan person. They'll tell you what the bank's procedures are. But in New York, if you're looking at refinancing and you're buying a house, and it's for a house or a condo, definitely, this is a little bit more over for first-time buyers, but it's called a SEMA refinance, which is a consolidated mortgage. And that's because in New York, your closing costs, there's mortgage tax. So we briefly mentioned closing costs during the presentation because it's a lot to go over. But if you're thinking about refinancing in the future, you definitely want to have that conversation because New York is one of the few states that has a mortgage tax for condos or houses, which really significantly increases your closing costs, whether it's a refi or a purchase.
Someone asked, have you ever helped folks renting in a co-op building purchase the same unit they're renting? Is there ever an advantage to that? Advantage for you or to buy what you're renting? I would say that if somebody was renting the unit out, if they wanted to sell it, they would be. I'm assuming that either because most co-ops have restrictions on how long you can rent it out for, you're probably in a sponsor unit and the sponsors don't have restrictions, so they can rent for a long time. And they usually don't rent them, sell them until they have to. They sell them a couple at a time each year because they're usually holding a bunch of them. I would have to know more about your specific situation, but you probably have a relationship with the owner of that co-op and should probably reach out to them and see if they're interested in selling it. That would be the first step. Yes, sponsored unit. So you should reach out to the sponsor or the sponsor's broker and see if they're interested in selling it. Okay, if that's everybody's questions, I'm going to wrap it up because we went over 6 o'clock because it's just so much information. And I'm sorry if we ran through it and if I talked fast. Please reach out to us. We have a bunch of resources that we didn't talk about, like Basecamp. We have a library of resources for every step of the way throughout the process. You can schedule a call with us. You're going to get the link to the class and the ebook, but really the Basecamp is one of our main tools that we offer buyers that I think is really such an amazing asset to them. It's beyond even the ebook. It has so much more than that in there. And Farah's just putting our contact information in there, and we hope to hear from you and would love to assist you in this process if you decide to go this way. Thank you so much for your time and energy tonight, and hope you learned something.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.